Hi, and welcome to Mission Success Women in Multifamily, MHN's monthly podcast series dedicated to the women shaping the future of the industry. I'm your host, Executive Editor Laura Valean. As the US continues to face a severe shortage of affordable rental housing, much of the conversation centers on financing, development pipelines, and the number of units being delivered. But what happens after those homes are built? How do we make sure housing is not only accessible, but also durable, welcoming, and designed with dignity? That's where my guest comes in. Lydia Liley is a registered interior designer with more than a decade of experience in multifamily design. How do designers do more with less? What choices make a property stand the test of time? And probably more importantly, why should interiors be part of the broader affordable housing conversation? Let's find out together from my guest. Hi, Lydia. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, hi. Thanks for having me.
So let's dive right in because when people talk about the affordable housing shortage, they usually focus on the numbers, and the financial aspects. What do you think gets missed when we don't talk about the interiors of those homes from the get-go?
Yeah. So not engaging with an interior designer soon enough, you can end up with contractor selected finishes. And if we are involved from early on, we can create a more cohesive finish scheme that helps a unit feel livable and not just built. Um, and a home that a future resident can feel excited about moving into. In a recent project that I worked on, Helms Bay, I was engaged very early on, and when we had to find places to cut, I had reached out to a lighting vendor and found out that they had a surplus of 300 fixtures that we were going to be able to get at a third of the cost. So
Wow.
if the bidding process had gone through without engaging an interior designer first, that would have been a missed opportunity to get a much higher cost product into the unit, and just kind of elevate all of the finishes a little bit more. So having a interior designer early on kind of gives you some of those opportunities that you might not have otherwise.
Right, right. And what does it mean in practical terms to make affordable housing feel like home rather than simply functional?
Yeah. So when we're looking at the units, they are a place for someone to eat and sleep, but that I think completely misses what it means to be a human and a person. We're wired for social connectivity, and creating spaces beyond the unit for residents to connect and engage is deeply important. At Catchlight Crossings, 1,000-unit affordable housing community in Orlando, we added small pockets of space throughout the community, and in different amenity areas to give residents either the option or ability to connect with others, or just have a small quiet space outside of their apartment, to just have by themselves, whether it's by the elevator lobbies, in the makerspace room, or in the community theater.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Obviously, you're working with tighter budgets for affordable housing projects than you would have for a market rate multifamily project. Where can design make the biggest emotional impact without adding major costs?
Yeah, lighting. Lighting is one of my favorite places to really kind of finesse into giving different feelings or emotions. There's such a surplus of lighting these days that is low cost and high impact, whether it's, having one really large, simple drum pendant that's 48 inches wide and takes up a lot of space, or doing, 9 small pendants in a group and kind of breaking that space up a little bit. Lighting for me is one of the biggest places. At a project down in southern Florida called Berkeley Landings, we had not even 8-foot ceilings in the club room. It was 7'10", And so that was a place where I really had to get creative with what kind of lighting went on in there. Because when you walk in, that's kind of one of the first things that you see. You know, your eye travels up and you want to see it. And so I found these really amazing kind of Sputnik-y, mid-century modern, polished nickel fixtures that really hugged. They were flush mounts that hugged the ceiling, but kind of spread out. When you walk in, we put four down, and it just really brings your eye and travels it down without making it so apparent that the ceilings were not as
So
high as you would have
creative.
liked. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You mentioned a few materials and choices, but what are other examples of materials or design choices that can feel elevated without being too expensive or custom? Or is it even possible to create a high-end look using commercial grade finishes?
Yeah, absolutely. Flooring, I mean, we have to have flooring. That's one of, that
Obviously,
is
yeah.
one of the things. And so creating a different pattern with the flooring. So obviously the easiest is just to kind of do an offset brick run, but we can do, a herringbone pattern. We could do a chevron, sometimes even like a parquet type flooring pattern. I did in Burlington Cove in the entryway. And it really doesn't add much. It's the same product and the same material, but it does add some interest without kind of compromising any of the codes or the material itself. So that's one. Another is paint. And just changing even not the paint color, but the paint sheen. And going, 3/4 or 2/3 of the way up with kind of like an eggshell or satin on the bottom and then a flat on top. It almost
Okay.
it's the same color, but it kind of creates a different tone of it, and just kind of catches your eye. And again, it's something that we were already going to put on the wall anyways. So just changing the sheen kind of helps add a little bit of something without inflating the budget, like tile or wall covering might.
Okay, okay. And how do you balance durability with warmth? In other words, how do you specify materials that can withstand heavy use but don't make a space feel institutional?
Yes. Uh, Wood is always my go-to. I love
Wood.
wood
Mhm.
flooring. Yes, wood. It's just in a good, mid-tone, kind of either cream or brown color. You know, wood. It's everywhere outside, and kind of mixing wood tones. I think early on in my career, I was so afraid to mix wood tones, but when you actually look outside, you realize that there's all kinds of different wood tones. There's
Right.
all different, colors that get mixed together. So I'm a lot less afraid of that now that I kind of understand how to do it a little bit better. And even when sometimes I might want to add, wood beams to a space, but we just don't even have the budget or anything that looks like it, just a brown paint that kind of mimics that same tone, and kind of, again, help break up what might be an otherwise all white ceiling.
Mm-hmm.
So adding kind of those warmer colors, but not being too vibrant with them where they date themselves.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. If we zoom out a bit, what would you say are the design decisions that residents may not notice on day one, but that determine whether a unit still looks good 5 or 10 years later?
Yes, that is always the hardest question, is how do you design for someone to feel excited about it, but not date it and trend it too much. Um, I would say not jumping on trends right when they come
Right
out,
away. Yeah.
and trying to get ahead of the curve, but kind of seeing what sticks for a couple years. I think sometimes the all gray units definitely date themselves. I think that was probably a little bit too much. And again, we don't live really in like an all gray world or an all one tone world.
Of
So I
course.
think figuring out how to uh, mix the different tones and colors. Another really hard part with the units is sometimes we are just really limited to a certain manufacturer for the flooring, a certain manufacturer for the cabinetry. And so then it's really figuring out what we can do with those puzzle pieces to make the best unit possible with those colors.
Okay. Obviously, one of your biggest limitations is the budget you have for making all the choices. But I was curious, when material costs jump mid-project, what does value engineering look like from the interior designer's perspective? What are you willing to compromise on, and what do you try to protect?
Yes. Typically, I try not to cut anything out. The first real exercise is, what can I find that's similar enough that will save some kind of significant cost, and especially what the product is. So to cut out, a carpet tile that might be in a business center or computer room and replace it with LVT, why that might be a large cost savings. What you're compromising on is that sound absorption that'll make that room not feel so echoey. So I'm usually trying not to omit something altogether, especially with lighting. I would rather find something that is a lot less expensive than take it out altogether, because that can really change a room. And then even in like the furniture phase at the very end, looking at kind of the number of things, versus, if I'm going to save $500 on this one sofa, that's not really quite worth it because the quality will go down. But if I have, 10 theater chairs in the theater room, maybe we go from a COM, a customer's own material that was like really, really perfect for it, but we go to like an in-grade fabric that still looks good, still supports the design scheme, but will save, it could be $400 per chair times 10, and then it really starts to add up and snowball a little bit.
Yeah.
Another place really is just going back to my vendors. So, these, my flooring vendors especially, they want to get their products in. And so when we're looking at 120 units of product, or 120 units with, 500 square feet, that adds up really quickly. So even if I go back to them and I say, hey, can you please, really give me your best price on this? We're still shy a little bit. Can you cut even 10 or 20 cents off per square foot? That really adds up. So having really good relationships with my vendors is another place that I'll go when we have to really look at kind of cutting some of the bigger numbers down.
It's a relationships business in the end.
It is,
so
yes.
Obviously everyone tries to take advantage of that when they can. Not too often, of course,
yes.
but
Yep.
whenever necessary. You mentioned earlier that you've worked on Catchlight Crossings, one of the largest projects probably. It's a 9-building affordable community near Universal in Orlando, and there's a significant amount of amenity space. How do you think about amenities differently in affordable housing compared with market rate multifamily?
In affordable properties, there are usually requirements for what you have to include and build and provide for residents. In Florida, two that I'm very familiar with that are more senior focused, but is, providing residents with computers to be able to use and printers, and that's based on the number of units. And so knowing that from the very beginning and making sure that we allocate enough space is really important. That requirement isn't in market rate. And providing residents with, especially the senior, at least 100 books and 5 magazine subscriptions is another place where I need to make sure that we have the space. And then also looking at furniture budgets that I've included those numbers in there. I think with affordable, again, we're looking at when we're allocating space for something, we want to make sure that it's not so specific that if that trend or that desire for something like a potting room, where you can replant your plants, if that kind of dies out a little bit, now we're left with this space that we again have to try to think and turn into something else. So kind of seeing what that staying power is for these different amenities. With Wendover, we've just found that theaters, activity rooms, the business center, and even a salon for senior properties is just still needed and still requested and still used. So kind of seeing those and following what actually works and what's beneficial, and not just what do we want to see on the leasing site to try to get people excited about it, but what will they actually use?
Speaking of what people actually use, what they want, let's try to bust some myths. Are there any assumptions that developers, policymakers, or even the public sometimes make about the affordable housing residents need or want from their living environment? What do they think these residents need?
Yeah, I mean, I think some will lose sight of the fact that affordable housing is a home. We see such a need for it, but just building it and kind of doing the bare minimum will show a lot in how a space feels and looks. The developers that I work with, like Wendover, really know that it's more than just a unit, and that this is the space that people get excited about and want to come home to.
Right.
And, it's a safe place for them to be as well. I really love working with them and figuring out ways that we can stretch a budget and get the biggest impact in all of those places, and not inflate that cost at the end when we really don't need to.
Of course. Are there any design lessons from affordable housing that market rate or luxury multifamily developers should be paying more attention to, in your view?
Yeah, I think, you're really only limited by your creativity. I think when you get into market rate or luxury, it can be fun because you sometimes seemingly have an unlimited budget, but it also doesn't allow you to kind of get as creative as you can with less. Again, looking at the things that that you have to have already: flooring, lighting, paint, even the grout color for a backsplash. So using kind of a lower cost subway tile, but doing even like a terracotta orange or like a mint green grout color. Again, not even an added cost. You already have to have it. It's the same price as a white grout or a black grout would be, but that impact of that can really change or support whatever design scheme that you're trying to go for. So I think not always relying on having some specialty wallpaper to kind of draw your eye to, but what are we already going to be using, and then where can we kind of turn it on its head a little bit to get creative with it.
And looking ahead, as the affordable housing shortage continues, what would you say the industry should prioritize so that new units are not only built quickly, but built to feel livable, durable, dignified, everything we've talked about?
Yes, prioritizing, I think the quality of the materials that get put in is huge, making sure that we're not um, skimping in the beginning to save a little bit of money, but actually end up paying more in the long run because things have to be replaced or repaired sooner than they should. Um, Another big key is building the spaces for residents to be able to come to within their own community is huge as we kind of do the suburban sprawl and communities get built further out. It's more important to have those support spaces within the building so that they're not having to go so far to kind of be able to find their community.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Lydia, for
Yeah,
sharing all these great insights with MHN's listeners.
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the July episode of Mission Success Women in Multifamily. If you enjoyed this conversation, check out our website on the third Thursday of every month for another inspiring story. And to make sure you never miss an episode, just follow the Lease Up on your favorite podcast platform. That's where you'll find all of Multi Housing News' podcast series, including Mission Success. Thanks again for listening. Till next month.